Welcome. Tonight we are going to make two candies. We're going to make some delicious nut brittle, and then we're going to make a white chocolate and dark chocolate peppermint bark. But the nice thing about this nut brittle is that there's no complexity of like having to make caramel. And if any of you have made caramel before, you know that there's some technique and some, I don't know, I guess I would say some skill, but some ability necessary, some mindfulness. Let's say mindfulness, because it's really not like a skill. It's patience, right? Because there's some things that could go wrong, right? And when it goes wrong, it goes like deadly wrong, right? So you have like throw the pan away, exactly right. So the great thing about this nut brittle is that you don't have to do that. You don't have to do, it's really good. It's really, really good. So I put a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan, and I start with that, and then I put the sugar on top of it. So it's about a half a cup of water in the bottom of the pan, and then the sugar on top. And then in goes a stick of butter. I mean, seriously, this is some of the easiest brittle you will make. So a stick of butter, and usually I'll cut it into a few little pieces just to make it melt evenly. And the heat's on about medium right now. Right, so Don's question is, why do you put the water in first? So if any of you have, for those of you who have made caramels before, you know that you want that sugar to kind of melt into the water, right, and dissolve evenly. And while this isn't making caramel, it's just sort of a habit of doing that, because you have the water on the bottom, you pour the sugar on top, and then everything sort of melts in nicely, and you don't have clumps of sugar that you have to stir in. So we put in 1/3 of a cup of corn syrup. So, but it is something that is used oftentimes in candies to give like the texture that you need. Sometimes in chewy candies, you know, it gives that chewy texture, in caramels for sure. So it's something that we bake with and use when we're, you know, really when we're baking, not only as a sweetener, but more for a texture from a texture perspective. Bring it to medium high, because we really want to bring it to a nice boil. So at this point, we let this melt, we bring it to a boil, and then we would normally take a candy thermometer. So a candy thermometer is a thermometer that goes up to, I don't know, about 450 degrees high, very high, because, you know, there's different temperatures at which candies set. So if you think about eating a caramel, you know, that's soft and chewy, that's what we call soft ball. And that's like 230 degrees, something like that, 250 degrees. And then if you eat candy that has a little bit some more chew to it, but not quite a firm, you know, somewhere between the caramel and this brittle. So that's like 280 degrees. And then this brittle right here is 300 degrees, and we call that hard crack. That's why we need the candy thermometer, because a traditional thermometer only goes up to 220 degrees or thereabouts. I'm going to show you how to do this really without a candy thermometer, which will be good because maybe you don't have one. This is going to come up to a boil. It should take, we're going to say about 15 minutes or so. Something like this. You need something like this because it does boil up, and you're going to add the nuts. So it needs to be big enough it's a great point, tall enough so that it doesn't boil over and that you have room to stir in the nuts. Exactly. Now, with the brittle though, we have to be ready to react right away, very quickly. So we have to have everything all ready to go. That's what we call our mise en place. So we have to have everything all set. So when our brittle is up to 300 degrees, then we're going to need to put in some baking soda, which I have here all measured out. Make sure you have it measured out. Don't have it in your cabinet and say, oh shoot, it's 300. I've got to go over here and get my stuff ready. You know, at 300 we have to be like ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stir this around a little bit, and then I'm going to take a little bit off of my spatula and drop it into this ice water. And I'm going to feel it. It's going to go down to the... So do you see that? It's still pretty gooey, right? It's not really hard crack. This might be around the time that you would do for a caramel. So we're going to go a little bit longer because I don't want it so soft. Rolling boil. Yeah. So the faster you boil it, the quicker it's going to get to temperature. Because really what we're wanting to do is boil off all that water, liquefy the sugar, and then increase the heat to that point where it's, you know, at a hard crack stage. Before the candy thermometer. Okay, so a little bit in the ice water. Do you hear that? Okay, I think that's good. So I have my baking soda right here. That really lightens it and makes it a little bit, changes the texture a lot of the brittle, makes it really crunchy. And then I have my pan right here, and I have my nuts. Took it off the heat, and I'm going to pour in the baking soda and stir it. Now this is 300 degrees. So if this gets on your skin, be very careful. But you see how it's boiling up and getting really like light? Do you see that? That's what the baking soda does. It makes it kind of light. Then your nuts. We just stir this around. It's lots of nuts. Do you see how many nuts? There's not a lot of brittle. And very, very quickly, we need to pour it out. It pours out very easily into a big clump. But this is where you have to like work so fast. So we pour it out, and then I try and spread it out as best I can. And then this metal thing gets hot, so be careful. And then what I do is I have my strapping lad, and I ask him to come over. And basically, maybe I'll step on it. I'm like, how am I going to do it without the strapping lad? So then I take my sheet pan, and I put it over the top. And strapping lad, you know, is really tall and heavy, but I think stepping on it is actually an excellent idea. But you can have strapping lad do it with a pot holder. Oops, sorry, Celine. With a pot holder, you know, because it's going to get hot. So I feel like I Love Lucy, making wine. Okay, so let's see what we have. And I was stepping on this, so don't get shocked. Claire had this like horrified look on her face, like, what is she doing? So stepping on it, look at that. It's beautiful. Wow. Nice, hey? All right, so then a little bit of fleur de sel, because I like a salty. So this is a good, you know, if you do regular, you know, if you do salty, you may not want to put fleur de sel, but fleur de sel is that nice crunchy salt on top, and so it gives a burst of flavor. And then what I do is I do usually put my sheet pan back on it just so I can get the salt to adhere a little bit, yeah. Actually, the handsome strapping lad last night used, you know, just like a wooden spoon to break it all up. So handsome strapping lads come in handy. So the bark is super simple. It's white chocolate, dark chocolate, a little bit of cream, some candy, some crushed candies, and look at how beautiful that comes out. That's so nice. I know, wow, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to melt the white chocolate. And so we're going to do this over a double boiler. We don't have room for all these tools, so we can always make a double boiler. So we just put water in the bottom of the pan, maybe an inch or so of water. We bring it to a simmer, and then we put the bowl on top. Chocolate's very delicate, so if it gets too much heat, it does quote unquote burn. Now when it burns, it doesn't turn brown or black like we think of burning, but it seizes up. We want to put it over the simmering water, and you want to make sure that I don't know if you can see any steam, but there was a little bit of steam coming up here. So you know, a little bit of steam is okay coming up, but we want to make sure that it really doesn't burn the outside, you know, that the outside of this bowl here doesn't get too hot. So we want to kind of watch that. Ideally, your pan would be a little bit bigger so that it could, you know, the bowl could really fit into the pan a little bit better. But again, you know, this is what we have to work with, so this is what we're going to do. So we just have to be a little bit more careful and understand what we're looking for. So we put it over the water. The bowl will get hot. So have a towel or something to pick it up with, you know, and stir it and hold it. A fairly flat, maybe a newer, right? A newer sheet pan or something flat like this. And it doesn't have to be a sheet pan, but just something flat. And then we'll take some aluminum foil and we'll wrap it around the pan. And it doesn't matter if it's shiny side up or down. It does not matter at all. So you would take your ruler And you would, just like with the back of a fork or something, just score a box that is 9 inches by 13 inches. I don't like to use a Sharpie or write on here because I just don't ever, you know, with food, I don't want to. So now I have my little score. So that's perfect. Then in my other pot, I'm going to take my dark chocolate, and this I'm going to put directly into a pot. We're going to go directly on the heat. Dark chocolate, I think about 6 teaspoons, if I'm correct, of cream. Is that right? And a little bit of peppermint extract in here. And then we're just going to heat this up. The other thing I just want to say about the chocolate is you can also look for the bitterness of the chocolate. So the Ghirardelli has a 60%. They have a 60% cocoa. So that's a little bit more, a little less sweet, a little more bitter. But the Baker's is a little sweeter. Like if you just got a Nestle chip, that would be a little bit sweeter than the 60%. And then there's some bulk chocolates that are even more, that are even higher levels of cocoa, like even go to 70 and 80%. That I know that they sell here, and they're beautiful, delicious chocolates. And if you like that more bitter flavor, you know, not as sweet, then you could opt for something like that. I'm going to take some of this white chocolate, and I'm going to put it on my tray here, and then take a spatula and spread it out. And it's pretty thin. Don't be alarmed that it's so thin. And kind of come to the edge of your rectangle, and if you need to put more on, do. Just put a nice thin layer. I mean, it's like 1/8 of an inch. It's pretty thin. It's icing thin. I think that's a great analogy. Okay, this is ready. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator really fast. Oh no, first I have to put my candies on top. So a little layer of candy, crushed candies. We'll talk about how to do that in 1 second. So they're peppermint candies that you can, you know, just the standard peppermint candies, candy canes, whatever you have. And then what I do is I put them in a bag, a plastic bag, and I use my rolling pin, and I just beat them in the plastic bag. Now it does have a tendency to, you know, to put little holes in the bag. So once, you know, you just have to be careful on that part of it. But I just really, that's what I do. I break it up like that, and then keep it in a little baggie. And it's actually, you know, if you have a little extra, keep it on hand. It's always nice for anything. And now I'm going to bring out the white chocolate that's chilled. Well, that's a good point. So when you put on the dark chocolate, I found when I made this, it didn't really, the dark chocolate is hot, but it didn't really melt. The next step, where we put the white chocolate on the dark chocolate, that's a little bit more crucial to have the dark chocolate really set. Because the dark chocolate is softer because we've added this cream to it. So it's not going to set up hard, again, like it would a chip, because we've added cream and we've added the peppermint extract. So it's going to be, it's automatically going to be softer, so take a little bit longer to set up. This layer is a little bit thicker than our last layer. So then we just spread this on here like this. Okay, so this I'm going to put in the freezer. We're going to give it a few minutes in the freezer. It's not going to be perfect. Awesome. And then the white chocolate, we'll just reheat that, and the white chocolate will go on top. So when we're melting chocolate on the top of the double boiler, remember we're making sure that it's not too hot on the sides, it's not like raging boil, and we're still going at a very nice low and slow temperature. If we're melting chocolate like we did with that dark chocolate in the pan, we usually, I only use the pan on the direct heat if there's some other element of liquid in the pan with the chocolate. So here we had the cream in there, so I wasn't worried about the chocolate burning on the heat directly, so that's why you're able to melt that in the pan. You could also have done that in the microwave. We could also have done it on the double boiler. So it says in your recipe 110 degrees. You don't need to take out the thermometer, but you do need to make sure that it's thin, or, you know, warm to the touch. Yes, more pourable. And there's a real fine line between thick because you burnt it and thick because it's not warm enough. Okay, and then we'll take our palette knife. And sometimes I'll even wet it a little bit. That helps. to spread it. Because then we'll take our candy and then we put it into the fridge to cool, and we pull it out just like that. Nice. Yay. Then you could take it and just break it with your hands. You can cut it, you know, it says in the recipe to cut it, but I kind of like it in rustic pieces. So yeah, I break it out, you know, take it off here and just that looks nice. You know, it's thin, but it's certainly not too thin. It feels thin when you do it. Feels like that's not going to be enough chocolate, but it really does make a pretty nice. It's 3 layers too, with some candy in between. And one thing I did want to say though, so this bark will last in the refrigerator, you know, a week or so. Don't let it linger in your refrigerator though, because it gets the flavors of the refrigerator. So if you're going to have it in a while, you know, you can start making it now. Just put it into a airtight container and store it in the freezer. So yeah, so it will get soft, which was exactly what I wanted to say. So if you do go ahead and bag them all up and everything, you want to keep the bark in the refrigerator.